everyone, and welcome to the Arrow's first ever debate between the college Republicans and college Democrats. Tonight's questions will consist of questions from our students and from our moderators. For our college Democrats, we have Camille Scholes, who is a political science and communication studies major, as well as Ethan Schumer, who is a political science and history major. For our Republicans, we have Reagan Tibbs, is a political science, agribusiness, agriculture, communications major, and Gavin Sample, who is a political science major. Each team will have 3 minutes for their initial answer and 2 minutes for their rebuttal. Now, let's go ahead and hear from our moderators for the night.
Good evening. I'm Clayton Hester. A bit of an introduction. We're not here tonight to ask each team to represent their candidate, President Trump or Vice President Biden. We're here tonight to hear from four students just like us, talking from the perspective of the two major political parties. And tonight we're here to hear about their views on where we are and where we should be headed.
Good evening. I'm Allison Otto, and tonight is an opportunity to hear from fellow students about political issues that impact the future of our country. These students might just be our next generation of leadership and could pave the way for future generations. Tonight, we'll get to as many questions as we have time for, and we'll close with final statements from each debater. We will begin tonight's debate with the Republicans, since their party has the incumbent president. What will the most important issue facing the president be after the election is over?
Good evening. My name is Gavin Sample. I'm representing the College Republicans tonight. I'd like to thank the Southeast Arrow for hosting us, my partner, Reagan Tibbs, for being in this debate with me, and also the College Democrats for graciously agreeing to all this, especially in the kind of political climate we're in. So after the election, which is a very contentious topic, obviously, right now, the main issue the president, whoever that may be, will face, the main issue they will face will be obviously the coronavirus economic recovery that is already underway, but will need additional months, if not another year, to fully get back to normal of where we were. And this issue has been shrouded in misinformation and, partisan bickering, and it's really important that, we make sure that, whoever wins the presidential election, that is important. It's also important that we fight the coronavirus and get back to where Americans can go to work, they can pay their bills, they can, go to work safely and be healthy as Americans. And I think the best way to do this is to not only fight the coronavirus, but also to not be scared of it. I think President Trump put it great when he said, "Don't let the virus rule over you," or something like that. One of those, something like that. The quote is slipping me right now, but he said, "Don't let the virus rule over you. Don't live in fear of the virus." And I think that's great, and especially when we get a vaccine rolling through, that will be a way to where we can protect our most vulnerable, which are our seniors and our sick people, while also letting all of our young people, all our healthy people go back to work and just get this country back rolling. I know, my work luckily has not really been stifled from the coronavirus, but I know a lot of people, friends and family, who have lost hours, who have lost jobs, people who, have lost, time with their family, who couldn't go to funerals, they couldn't go see an ultrasound. I know I heard a story of a child who is very autistic, and they were making great progress in the special school that they had started going to in the spring and January, and that once kind of everything shut down in March, all that progress was wiped out. And it's just devastating to hear that the coronavirus is more than just, it's just more than just has economic effects on us. It also has social effects, psychological effects, people not getting to see loved ones, people not getting to attend their parents' funeral. So the biggest issue post-election is getting back to normal. And getting back to normal has to do with reasonably opening back up. We cannot live in fear of this virus. We have to make sure that we get a vaccine out of the way, through the population, but also in a reasonable manner. Thank you.
And now we will turn to our Democrats for their 3-minute response.
I'd like to thank the Southeast Arrow for sponsoring this event, our moderators, Clayton and Allison, our friends from across the aisle, Gavin and Reagan, and my friend Camille. After this election, the first thing that must be done is a peaceful transition of power. The President of the United States has signaled that he will not honor the results of this election. That is preposterous. Whoever the winner is, when they're inaugurated on January 20th, has a full plate. First is tackling the coronavirus pandemic, including national mask mandates, as well as more funding for those out of work, for schools, and any other group. People need to go back to work, and students need to go back to school. This president has done almost the exact opposite that he should have done. President Biden will absolutely take the lives of the American people seriously and do everything in his power to make sure that our country gets back on track. The House of Representatives has passed legislation for more funding, for more relief packages. The Senate has failed to vote on that. If we are so lucky to maintain a Democratic House and win a Democratic Senate, Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, as well as President Biden, will make sure that the American people are taken care of. Beside from the coronavirus pandemic, racial justice must be tackled. The lives of people of color in this nation are under attack. Because of the rhetoric of President Trump, Asian Americans are at much higher risk of hate crimes. This is unacceptable. All Americans must be treated equally, and equal justice under law must be maintained. Thank you.
And now we will go to the Republicans for their response.
So the most important issue to the Democrats is this perceived notion of that the election is contested by President Trump. And I get where they're coming from somewhat, in that he has alluded to the fact that there is some irregularities with the election. Yes, there seems to be a massive push for universal mail-in voting, which has kind of gone away in some of the rhetoric. And we can see that when they tried to do this in the state primaries, that this led to massive problems. We can see here when it came time to do the primary in, or their local elections in New Jersey on May 12th, these are local elections, that 9.6% of the ballots were lost. They were rejected, sorry, because the signatures did not match. And there's similar cases in Wisconsin and New York. I think New York here, a total of 21% of their ballots in their June 23rd primary were found to be, were rejected after they were sent through the mail. And we're seeing massive mail-in voting like we've never seen before. And on top of that, we're also seeing cases of fraud, viral videos of people paying people to sign ballots, viral videos of people finding ballots, voting for both candidates, whether in the trash, in the dump. So I think it is, President Trump isn't saying he won't step down from power if he loses. It's just he's, not necessarily conceding, this second. It's kind of, the media frames that very oddly. And two, the Democrats in the House have been the main ones holding up coronavirus stimulus. Nancy Pelosi in particular has been ruthless in making sure she wants to wait until after the election to do a coronavirus pandemic relief. Republicans in the Senate, I do have some problems with them, myself personally, but she has been kind of the prime opponent of doing stimulus now and today. She's been called out by her own caucus, by her own party members, Ro Khanna, and also, Democrat presidential candidate Andrew Yang, who said, pass something now, and she refuses. Thank you.
We will go to the Democrats for their response.
We know that mail-in ballots, it's not working so great, so smoothly. This is a crazy time for all of us, but we have to make these changes. We have to do this to ensure our democracy is alive. What President Trump could have done is make sure the post office maintained funding, They did not get rid of ballot drop-off boxes. And as far as automatic voter registration, we should make the step like many other advanced countries and make that a priority. Democrats care about the people affected during this pandemic. And as far as Speaker Pelosi, her relationship with President Trump could be better. Probably a problem on both sides. But this has been a talking point for Republicans for the last couple decades. Nancy Pelosi is evil. She's a California liberal. She's from San Francisco. We can point fingers all we want, but whoever is leading us, our nation right now, we all must work together. The amount of voter fraud between 2000 and 2014, out of over 1 billion votes cast, there were 31 instances of voter fraud. 0.00006% of ballots are false. This rhetoric on the right that this election is being stolen by Democrats, by illegal aliens, is not true. Thank you.
All right, and some of that, the conversation about where we are right now in the Congress relates to this next one, which is directed towards the Democrats in order here. Do you think that congressional gridlock is contributing to a lack of policy action regarding COVID-19? And with that also, what should be the first course of action on COVID-19 by a newly elected president as far as the policy action in place there?
I believe personally that congressional gridlock is such a big part of the honestly slow response to this pandemic. Not only do we have a majority Democratic House, we have a Republican Senate, and we also have a Republican president. Therefore, the ball mainly is in the Republican court in order to basically, quote unquote, coerce the Democrats into getting a stimulus package out there. Now, do I have my own problems with the Democratic House? Of course. We all want a new stimulus package. We want it to be expanded in. We want more benefits. But also, since the gridlock is so bad, it's hard to find common ground because of how polarized it is. Now, I think that the new president should do a few things. I think that, one, there should be more money in the stimulus check. I think that the $1,200 was honestly stingy. There are more lost wages in the first 3 months of the pandemic that the stimulus check could even cover. In fact, the stimulus check only handled about two to three bills. And if you're someone who is low income and you have a minimum wage job, you still have other bills to pay. If you're behind on one bill, that only goes to 2 bills, including your past due ones. Therefore, we should increase it. And we should also add more money for people who are on food stamps, on WIC, unemployment. We need to cater to them because they are also at the bottom, essentially. And so if we're only giving them $1,200, they're not going to be able to get out of where they are, especially in a pandemic. We've seen people who've lost jobs. They've been furloughed with no hours, so they're basically fired until further notice. We have people who are healthcare workers. They are being put basically in the depths of AT double hockey stick, for a better word, with little to no PPE depending on their state. There is no federal guidance to helping the states help them, and so they're risking their lives, and some of them aren't even getting pandemic or hazard pay. So we need more policies, we need more precautions to them specifically because they are risking their lives to help us get through their pandemic because that's their job. We also see college students suffering, especially ones who are ruled independent by their college or FAFSA or in poverty, and a lot of them weren't even eligible to get a stimulus check. So we have a lot of missing communities in this check that deserve to be on the check because they are tax-paying American citizens. Now, a lot of Democrats may say that we need to extend it to other communities. I think that we should do that after we get the basics down. I think that we can talk about extending it and expanding it after we get through the initial pandemic, which is obviously going to be long-term. We also have to talk about funding and providing more support to healthcare workers. They need more PPE. The states are not meeting their requirements. They aren't helping enough people, and therefore we have healthcare workers and teachers dying because the state and the government were not able to help them quick enough. Thank you.
All right, to the Republicans now. Congressional gridlock, is it contributing to where we are in the Senate as far as COVID-19 action?
Thank you, Clayton, for that question. And I agree with my friend Camille that congressional gridlock is a problem when it comes to enacting policy. And we see this not just in COVID-19, we've seen this throughout our history, excuse me, because that's just how our system is. There is a minority and there is a majority in each house. And yes, there will be gridlock at times, but we still need to come together and find common ground. And I agree with Camille on a lot of things. We need to have more funding for our healthcare workers and more hazard pay for people like teachers. My mom's a teacher. I wish she had more hazard pay, more ability to fight COVID in her classrooms. I also think that we need to, I was fortunate enough to get a $1,200 stimulus check. I know there were many that were not as fortunate as I. And so I agree that if you need that money, you need to be able to get it from the government. And I think that we need to emphasize the fact that there are many Americans that were put out of work. In addition to being a teacher, my mom is a hairstylist, and she was not able to work for, I believe it was about 5 months because of restrictions placed down by the state of Illinois. And so I agree that there needs to be some sort of action taken on both sides of the aisle, that there needs to be some sort of reconciliation and agreement and recognition that there must be action taken. What that looks like, I'm not sure. I must admit, I'm not the smartest man when it comes to policy creation on the Republican and Democratic side, but I still think, and I agree that partisan gridlock in Congress, both on the Republican side and on the Democratic side, is a problem, not just in COVID-19, but in general. And we must do whatever we can to break that gridlock and come together, because in the end, this is a crisis we all are fighting together, and we need to have a solution where we all contribute and where we all can get out of this pandemic on the other side. Thank you.
All right, Democratic response, 2 minutes.
So there's not much that I can really say because me and the Republicans are in agreement. And so it's great that we are able to agree that congressional gridlock is a problem, especially right now. My mom, she's a healthcare worker. She actually caught COVID in March. So I had to ask for an extension on the majority of my midterms because I was worried about her. Is she alive? Yes, thank God, she's alive. But she used to work at the Missouri Veterans Home in St. Louis. There, she had little to no support. She had little to no PPE. Staff were quitting because of the environment, and the state was not caring. And so what we're seeing here is that healthcare workers don't even see it as worth the risk to even want to save the lives of other Americans, because I have my own family at home. My mom is the only parent that I have, and she was like, now, do I need this job? Yes. Do I have to die for this job? Absolutely not. Now, she hasn't caught it again because she works for a private nursing home now. So they test her twice a week at this point. But they're also fortunate enough to have the resources to do that. And so I think that what me and the Republicans are trying to say is that America needs to get their stuff together. I am not the richest person in the world. I am not the smartest person in the world. But what I am is a people person. And what I can see on the people that I talk to on both sides of the aisle is that we need something done. Do we know what that is? No. But I know that I need the government to figure out another stimulus package. I need the government to get the economy together so I can have a job after college. I need the economy to be okay so I'm not worried about paying my student loan back because I don't have the money for it. If I didn't have an on-campus job, I'd be poor. And I'm happy that SEMO has enough money to pay me bi-weekly. But some college students aren't so lucky. Some of them don't have jobs at all. Some of them have student loans up the ante and they can't even pay them back, and they don't know how they're going to pay them back. So what we're seeing is that even though the government has made steps to ease us during this pandemic, there are still a lot of factors that haven't been addressed, and that is because Congress has done little to nothing after March 27th to fix it. Thank you.
Republicans, further comment?
So when we talk about partisan gridlock, I think one of the things that really prevents both parties from moving on their positions is, honestly, I think some of it might be pride. And it's hard to get, to recognize that there are other people that have positions that are different than you and that might be completely off base from where you are. But it's okay to work together. That's what Congress and our system is all about, working together to solve the problems that face America. And so I have family too that are healthcare workers, and I think they deserve a lot more credit than we've been giving them, absolutely. I mean, without our healthcare workers, we wouldn't, I don't know how we would have handled this pandemic. It would have been unimaginable what it would have been like. And so I do agree that we need to find common solutions, that both sides need to listen to their constituents, whether they're in blue states, red states, purple states, whatever. They need to listen to their constituents and find out what is really needed Because sometimes members of Congress get caught in the Washington bubble. They get so caught up in what's happening in Washington, they forget what's happening in Main Street. In like my hometown of Lincoln, Illinois, they forget what's happening when they're talking at the arcade having a cup of coffee in the morning. They may not understand those conversations they're having, and they may not realize the conversations people are having around the dinner table every night. How are we going to pay for this next bill? How are we going to pay rent this month? How are we going to pay our car premium, our car insurance? And so members of Congress in Washington need to listen to their people, listen to their constituents, and then we can move forward and hopefully pass some more relief for the American people. Thank you.
This question will be directed towards the Republicans. The pandemic has not only greatly impacted the United States' health, but also our economy. With this has come stimulus efforts by Congress. As the country moves forward and toward recovery, what should the shape of the economy be coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic? And what should the role of the government be in that?
Yeah, on top of the obvious negative health effects this virus has had on the country, the more obvious and I think more widespread is the economic effects. And largely that's due to our shutting down, which is necessary to prevent deaths. To what degree we shut down or when we need to open up is heavily debated, obviously. You can look to models like Sweden, who barely shut down in comparison to us. They don't even require people to wear masks, and they seem to be doing very much on the up and up. They have a lower death rate than us. And you look at other countries, kind of varying degrees of success with locking down, opening back up, locking down. So it is kind of a testy, trying to strategize what to do, and that's why we see so much bitterness and differing of plans on the national stage with the members of Congress. And I think the key to opening back up the country, because I think that's what we're all here for, or what we're all kind of hopefully striving for when we talk about the economic recovery, is not staying locked down forever, is opening back up. I think that's obvious. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. It's just a matter of when and how we open back up. And I think a key to opening back up would be when we get the coronavirus vaccine. And the coronavirus vaccine, hopefully, will come sooner rather than later. We don't know. The president has been very close with medical companies and working with them and trying to get the FDA to fast track these drugs and get them out to the public, but also make sure they're safe. And when we get this vaccine, I think it's important that we use it wisely. And what do I mean by when I say that? That we give it to the people who need it the most. And of the people who are dying from coronavirus, we know that 94% of them, I believe, 94% of them have comorbidities. It means they already have kind of a pre-existing condition like diabetes, hypertension, or hypertensive diseases like high blood pressure, things like that, where they already have their immune system compromised. And also people over 65. People over 65 are about, I want to say 30% of 35% of COVID cases, but they are 80% of COVID deaths. So the immunocompromised, that's a big long word for sick, and the elderly need to be fast-tracked and given a coronavirus vaccine. And with this vaccine, we can enable those people to be safe, and we know that a healthy young person like myself, like Reagan here, like everybody, hopefully everybody here, that no matter, the deaths among middle-aged, young, healthy people is very low. And I think we have to realize the numbers and realize, people are going to get coronavirus if we open back up. And we can reduce the risk, wear our masks, do all that. But this vaccine needs to be used primarily towards the people who are most vulnerable to the virus, to dying from it, to being severely injured by it, and to not try and rush it out to the general population. I know Kamala Harris, vice presidential candidate, she said, I'd take the vaccine if the CDC said to give it to me, but I wouldn't take it if Trump said to give it to me. And it was kind of childish at the last debate. I don't see where we're rolling out a vaccine and the CDC and Trump disagree. It's kind of silly, but the vaccine is kind of the prime number one motivator and enabler of us opening back up and getting our economy back on its feet. Thank you.
And we will move to the Democrats.
I would love for the country to be opened up like other Democrats. We don't want the economy to be shut down indefinitely. The key, though, is to open when we're ready. If you look back at the Spanish flu pandemic 100 years ago, we opened up too early. You see, if you look at a graph, you see the cases. There's a rise, it falls, and the bottom of that is when we open back up, and then cases go way back up. The second wave, the third wave, how many waves there are. The key is to open when we're ready. We are not ready to open. We were not ready to open back in the summer. You can't just wait a couple months and say, oh, things are better. The summer winds are going to blow the virus away. No, that's not how it works. As far as a vaccine, yes, we want a vaccine. We want it as soon as possible. We want it to be tested, safe. We want it to be available for all Americans, especially those who are in need of it, seniors and people with pre-existing conditions. I think the reason that Senator Harris made that comment, which it could have been a better comment, the President of the United States has diverged from the advice of the CDC, from Dr. Fauci. He has contradicted Dr. Fauci as well as the CDC director countless times via tweet. The President of the United States needs to believe science, needs to do what the CDC says, wear a mask, which he refused to until he was pressured to. Don't hold rallies. Just do everything that the rest of the American people are doing. We stay at home. We leave when we need to. We social distance. The President of the United States needs to follow the example that is set by his own CDC and the American people. Thank you.
Now to the Republicans for a response.
So I hear this term a lot, believe in science. And I kind of find that interesting because science is not a definite, dogma written 4,000 years ago. It is ever changing. It is theory. It is good until we prove something is better. And the CDC and Dr. Fauci have gone back on things. They've corrected. They've updated. They've made better their policies. And President Trump, yes, disagrees with Dr. Fauci because he's the president. Dr. Fauci is the health official. President Trump does have his own opinions. He also has economic concerns, different concerns. Dr. Fauci really isn't there to balance the economic concerns with health concerns. He's primarily concerned with the health of Americans. We also elected Donald Trump rather than Dr. Fauci. But Dr. Fauci is a valuable asset in being a health expert, and he has assisted the president greatly, has praised him for his efforts at times. They do have a contentious relationship, but that's government. And yes, this idea that we can't rush to open up. I mean, it's very interesting, our federal system we have with all of our states. Some states have opened up and some states have stayed closed down. And it's kind of a good blueprint of what we need to do nationally. And I also think states like Florida's really hard hit in the media for opening back up, and it's so dangerous. And really in the last 2 weeks, they really haven't seen a huge spike in their case count or their death count. Their death count actually has gone down when they've kind of released some restrictions. And the top five, if we're kind of going like by states, the top 5 states with the highest death per capita are actually all very lockdown states, primarily in the Northeast and also Louisiana. They stayed locked down, they're kind of still locked down, and there's a lot more factors that go into why certain populations in certain states are affected. But primarily, we should open up as a means to not only get back to normal, but I think it's also the right thing to do. It's kind of a matter of when. I would assume I'd probably want to open up sooner than my Democrat colleagues up here. And I think President Trump is eager to open up. He's wanting to get back to normal, and I think a lot of Americans are, and within reason, obviously. He's not wanting to open up, right tomorrow. He knows and cares about the health concerns of Americans.
And to the Democrats for a response.
Science is constantly evolving. We understand that Dr. Fauci has made some mistakes, as well as the CDC. They've revised their suggestions. That's the nature of science. The fact, though, is the president does not follow whatever the current suggestions are. He does not follow them. Democrats are most concerned about the lives of Americans. Over 200,000 people have lost their lives to this virus. We, of course, have economic concerns, but I hate to think that the President of the United States cares more about the stock market than the lives of the American people. This is shameful. This is unpatriotic. We want a president who cares about people, who has lived through tragedy, not someone who's been wealthy their entire lives bailed out constantly, someone who knows what it's like to be middle class, working class. Joe Biden will make sure that the deaths of the American people, that we maintain as low as we can the amount of deaths that we see. We must open up when we can. We cannot get back to normal until the economy opens back up. We know that. But the lives of the American people are far more important than the economy. And I hate to think that the president is worried about the stock market because it's an election year. Because usually whenever the economy is booming, the incumbent wins again. He needs to care more about the American people and the lives that are being lost every day. Thank you.
All right. And so the next question is directed to the Democrats. Investigations of Russian interference circulated around the 2016 election. This year, the president has said that mail-in balloting is a source of voter fraud, as was discussed in some detail earlier. Are current election methods secure, and should more reforms be made to the system?
I think the president's comments regarding mail-in voting have been disproven on some level, either by the platforms that he did announce them on, including Twitter. They enacted a fact check thing specifically to counter the numerous occasions of misinformation coming directly from the president. But we also see, as Ethan said, that the rate of voter fraud for a 14-year period for 1 billion votes was 0.000. I think 6%. Was it 4 zeros, Ethan? Yes. It's a minuscule amount. And even though we don't want that increasing, if the American people want to do voting by mail, we should allow them to do voting by mail. We should make it as safe as possible. There is no reason why Americans should be concerned about the security of their vote or their health while voting. In fact, we see many people saying, I'm just going to vote early, or I might not even vote at all because of how concerned I am about my health or the security of my vote. And pertaining to Russian interference, now, am I a security relations major? No, of course not. But I think that we do have enough proof to see that Russia had intent to interfere with our election. And whether or not that was successful is a different question that I am not qualified to answer. But what we can see is that a foreign country did have intent to affect the outcome of our election and affect the American people's voice through many measures. And we should upgrade our voting methods. I think that even if they are secure, we should still try to make it as secure as possible. We have reports of states having outdated machines that cause problems. We see states purging people off the rolls. We should have a more common sense voter policy. We should make sure that people know how they can register to vote, especially if they're felons. Felons need more information on how they can register to vote, if they're eligible, when they're eligible, and how they can vote. Because we have a lot of people who are committing voter fraud because they don't understand that they are not able to vote because they are a felon. So I think that the American people need more resources and need more accessibility to voter information as well as voting mechanisms. For example, voting early. In the state of Missouri, you can vote early without a notary if you have, if you're elderly, if you have a pre-existing condition, or if you're at risk of catching COVID. Without that, you need a notary. As we've seen on Living at Southeast, a lot of people have been looking for a notary, and a lot of people don't know what a notary is. They don't know how to get one. They don't know if it's free. The government needs to put in more effort to let us know, the voting population know, what we need to do, how we can do it, and when we can do it. There is no reasons why we should have nonprofits dedicated to securing our elections. That just seems ridiculous in a free nation that we have nonprofits and completely citizen-funded entities securing our elections for us. Thank you.
Republican response?
So voting is one of the most important civic duties that we have, and I think we all recognize that and understand that. I've been very fortunate here at Southeast to take a class just this past semester, excuse me, on voting rights, which talked about issues like vote by mail. As a resident of Illinois, it's not really practical for me to go home and vote during an election. So I have, since I came down to Southeast Missouri and started college here, I have voted by mail. And I must say, it is very, pretty secure. I haven't had any irregularities, although this year they misprinted the shipping label. But besides that, I still got my ballot and I was still able to vote. So I think while yes, voter fraud is not as big of an issue, and while, well, it's an issue when it happens, but the claim that universal mail-in voting leads directly to voter fraud, I agree there's not enough evidence that substantiates that claim, but there has been times when there have been issues with voting. Example, in Los Angeles, they had to take 1.5 million people off their voter rolls. Why? Because they were inactive. So that means they were not a resident of Los Angeles, they had passed away, or some other reason why they could not vote in Los Angeles. So there are problems that need to be addressed if we want to ensure that we have safe and secure elections. We do, I think, in the United States have pretty safe elections. Yes, there are attempts by foreign powers such as Russia, such as China, to interfere and to push their will and their intent on our election system. But the best way I think that we can defend our right to vote and defend our elections in the United States is all of us getting out there and voting if you're able to. Get registered. If you're not able, if you don't know if you're registered, check with your local county clerk, check with your Secretary of State or whoever your voting authority is. And again, voting by mail universally, I'm not sure of the evidence there is to support the claim that there is widespread voter fraud, but I still think that voting by mail, in my experience, is a pretty secure way to cast your vote. And so if it's an option that you have to exercise, then I think that voting by mail is still a secure way that people can cast their vote. Thank you.
All right, Democrats, 2 minutes to respond.
So, as you can see, basically, us and the Republicans basically agree that our elections are safe. And even if they are not, they should be safe. So I think there's not that much that we can go back and forth on. But what I do want to talk about is voter suppression. Because mainly we talk about voting as a sacred ritual, yet we forget the fact that there are active attempts to prevent people from doing so or having their vote actually matter in a meaningful way. We have basically mailboxes, and there's only one mailbox in some counties. We have voting locations being reduced to one area, and there's no way that the people who will vote are all able to vote when they want to in that county. Even if you can vote early, depending on the state you live in, you may not have an actual excuse to vote early, and you may have to, quote unquote, lie and try to vote early. So what we're seeing is that the American government, in some instances, is basically forcing people to decide, do I actually want to vote or not? Do I want to take the time and get off my job and lose a few hours or try to debate with my boss about, hey, I need to get off of work so I can vote? Because even though it's a right, we know some bosses will be like, nah, you're going to have to work this shift. I'm sorry, not enough people here. And what we're seeing is that some people are actually just not going to vote because they don't see that their vote matters. We see that the majority of voters who choose not to vote in midterm elections and in presidential elections because they believe that their vote doesn't matter. And there is no reason why in a free country, the majority of people in this nation choose not to vote when you were given the right to vote. It doesn't matter how you got it. It doesn't matter if your great-grandma had to march with MLK to fight for it. You should think that your vote matters in a free country. And so basically what we're saying on this side is that, number one, you should be able to vote. Number two, there should not be any hindrances to you voting. Number three, if you think that you can't vote, go to I Will Vote and check your voter registration. And four, there should not be any attempts at voter suppression in a free country. Thank you.
All right, Republican response.
I agree that any attempt at voter suppression is absolutely preposterous and absurd. The American people have a fundamental right to vote for their elected officials. That is the core of a democracy and of our Republican system of government. So any attempts, again, to suppress people's votes and to ensure that people don't vote, no matter what the reason is contrary to the beliefs this country was founded on. And I think that, I agree that there needs to be ways to allow for more people to get access to vote. Whether it is, I believe Illinois or some other states have passed laws saying that your employer must allow you to go and vote. There have been talks of allowing high school students that are eligible to vote, letting them leave high school, whether it be during their lunch period or sometime else, to go and actually vote. And so I think there needs to be these ways so that way people can actually go and vote. I remember I worked during the 2016 general election in one of our polling precincts, and it is sad to see that people did not know that they were registered to vote, or people that weren't sure if they were registered to vote. We have that ability that many people across the world don't have that option to have free democratic elections. And so I think we as Americans should honor and cherish that right. And I think that yes, if you are in any way unsure of your eligibility to vote, register to vote, check your state laws, check your local voter authority, whoever that might be. And it's always safe to know if you are registered to vote, because that is one of the most powerful tools that we have to affect change on our government and affect the policy directions that our government takes. Thank you.
Okay, this question will be for the Republicans. If President Trump wins the electoral vote, but not the popular vote again, should the United States consider eliminating the Electoral College?
So yeah, this is a pretty hot debate. The difference between the electoral vote and the national popular vote. For those who don't know, in 2016, President Trump won about 303 electoral votes, but he lost the popular vote by 2%. And I would say that we have a system in place where you cannot just get all of the votes in California or Texas or New York. You have to get the votes from a wide variety, a diverse, if you will, set of states across the country that are, many different landscapes. You got Rust Belt states, you got Plains states, you got, Northeast states, Western states, Southern states, that you have to win a broad coalition of people across these states. And the calls to reform the national popular vote, I think, are very partisan. Obviously it's very much held up by Democrats because, yes, Republicans had won the 2016 election because they got the electoral votes, but that is our system. It's just like with the U.S. Senate. The U.S. Senate is not a purely Democratic system. Wyoming has the same amount of representatives as California. That's our government. I think that works. That balances out population, as does the Electoral College. And this notion that we need to reform these systems and make them more democratic. I mean, pure democracy, as the ancient Greeks knew or came to learn as well, and also the founders knew, is not a good way to go. 51% could rule over the 49% and enact tyranny. I think that is also the case with our Electoral College. And also, it is interesting that the national popular vote, because while, yes, Hillary Clinton won, I believe, I want to say 48.6% of the vote. I'm kind of an election nerd, so I kind of remember these things. But she didn't win 48% of Americans. Not even half Americans vote. I think it was about 51% voted. So this kind of notion that she won half the country and just a slim majority, it's like, no, this is not the case. We do have a huge problem with people not voting. And to argue that the Electoral College is out of date, it is undemocratic. I mean, yes, it is undemocratic, but we are not a democracy. We're a republic that votes democratically. We have systems in place to control and to try and mitigate a tyranny of the majority, as I have already stated. So the Electoral College has become a partisan issue because it seems to have a partisan benefit towards Republicans. But I think trying to rush and reform key portions of our Constitution, the Electoral College has been around since this country's founding. And we can see whether the Electoral College or the Supreme Court number of seats that seems like the Democrats really want to reform the system and reform the government when it does not fit their needs as it stands. Thank you.
And now to the Democrats for their answer.
Just because we've been doing something for, say, 250 years doesn't make it the right decision today. 250 years ago, African Americans were 3/5 of a person. Women couldn't vote. We need to modernize. We need a 21st century solution to 21st century problems. The Electoral College worked in the beginning with a population that had very low literacy rates. The existence of Electoral College, a body of men at that time who were scholarly, educated, who could make sound decisions for the whole entire nation, that was a good idea. In the 21st century, we have the internet, we have cable news, we have radio. People are more informed than ever and should have a right to have a say of who is president of the United States. If an argument on the right is if you eliminate the Electoral College, that candidates are only going to campaign in big states and big cities, well, I don't see candidates visiting Wyoming or Vermont right now, so the nature of campaigning will change, but it'll transition from candidates going from Iowa, Ohio, New Hampshire to larger population centers. More likely than not, more Americans would be able to see the presidential candidates speak and be engaged. The Electoral College, when it was put into our Constitution, didn't account for the massive population that we have amassed today. Wyoming is a 40th of California size, but not a 40th of the electoral votes. One vote, one person. If you look at a map, you know, the maps that we see after Election Day, coloring counties and states, you see a big red swath in the west, in the Great Plains. That is open land. And then you see up in the northeast a little bit of blue. Those people, just because they live in a geographically smaller area, doesn't mean their vote is less. Thank you.
Now to the Republicans for a response.
Yeah, I think a big advantage of the Electoral College, and as you stated, a national popular vote would drive people to the bigger states, and we would never ever see a presidential candidate in Missouri, maybe St. Louis, but let alone Cape Girardeau. People will recall, and most of us in this room are too young to have voted back then, but in 2008, Missouri, Obama almost won Missouri. It was within 2 points. And it's kind of this beautiful thing with American democracy. You look back at past elections, swing states are not permanent. The American electorate is ever changing. The states are ever changing. And the Electoral College makes it to where candidates cannot afford to focus on just Florida, New York, California, Texas. They have to come to Iowa, rural Iowa. They have to come to Ohio. They have to address the concerns of the Rust Belt workers in Michigan. They cannot just keep screwing them over. They have to go to New Hampshire, who has 4 electoral votes, who has a very small population. I think about not even 1.5 million people. They have to go to these small states. They have to go to these medium-sized states. They have to go to these big states. They have to get a coalition of Americans, not just people from big metro urban areas. They have to campaign, sometimes in Missouri, if the political climate is right, and we are kind of in we used to be the bellwether up until 2012. But the Electoral College is a system that does work. It does work. Yes, candidates can win with a minority of the popular vote, but that is a part of our. I mean, the party can win the Senate with the minority of the popular vote. We have a representative system in place, not a democratic system in place, and the Electoral College is a check on, like I said, the tyranny of the majority. And those majority are usually people in big urban areas, and it gives people in suburban areas and rural areas a voice that they otherwise wouldn't have by being overruled by big population centers. If we had a national popular vote, Missouri really wouldn't have their concerns addressed. Michigan really wouldn't have their concerns addressed. Iowa, New Hampshire really wouldn't have their concerns addressed. And I think trying to reform this system and make it into some ideological, some kind of utopian pie-in-the-sky idea is very dangerous. And pure democracy doesn't work, as we see from ancient Greece and many examples in the past. Our founders warned against this, and we should heed their call. Thank you.
And to the Democrats for their response.
It's wrong to characterize people who live in urban areas as those who would seek for mob rule. The point of eliminating the Electoral College is every vote is equal. Our current system overwhelmingly puts favor on rural areas, and we want to equal that out. Yes, Democrats tend to crowd into cities, but why should the candidates not visit those places where so many people live? In the last 7 presidential elections, Republicans have only won the popular vote once. I imagine if the roles were swapped, the Republicans would favor abolishing the Electoral College. The amount of votes, of individual votes, should decide the presidency. That's how many, many other countries, advanced countries, how they run their elections. Whenever you have a candidate who secures the Electoral College but not the popular vote, you have resentment from the other side, and this hurts our democracy. The Electoral College is outdated, yes, but one of the beauties of our system, our Constitution, is that it can be changed, that it can be modified. It is a living document that can be changed with 2/3 majority. So the fact is, the Electoral College is outdated and it suppresses the vote. One person, one vote. Thank you.
All right, our next question has to do with news brewing this very week with the hearings in the Senate regarding Amy Coney Barrett, President Trump's Supreme Court nominee. And opponents of Barrett expressed concern that her religion will inform her ideas on political policy. It should be noted that 5 out of the current 8 justices, like Barrett, are Roman Catholic, with the exception of Kagan and Breyer, who are Jewish, and Gorsuch, who is Episcopalian. Do you believe it would be acceptable for a Supreme Court justice's views to be influenced by their religion or other personal beliefs? And this is directed at the Democrats.
Now, I think that there is a fine line between being influenced by your religion and then enshrining your religion into the law. There is a difference. So, for example, if I am a random religion and I'm like, okay, my religion says that I shouldn't eat this food. I'm not going to say, I'm going to ban this food because I can't eat it. I'm going to say, you know what? My religion says I can't eat this food, but I'm not going to ban it because of my religion. What we're seeing is, in a lot of instances, people's religions are affecting other people's rights. We can see this with slavery and gay marriage. We can see that the religious purpose, the purpose of this being enshrined or this being banned as a whole was based off of morals from a religion. Now, is it okay to have a religion? Of course. We're not saying that you can't have a religion. I have a religion. But there is a clear difference between you having a real religion and then you letting your religion become the law. One of the reasons why slavery was so widespread within the United States was because it was religiously indoctrinated into slaves' heads and into everyone else's heads that it was morally okay to do so. And what we're saying is that it should not be morally okay for someone to insert their entire religion into the law. Now, is it okay that she has a religion? Of course. But what we are worried about is that her religious ideas can become the law. We can see this with Roe versus Wade. A lot of people are worried because they want to be able to have the choice to have an abortion. Now, is that an entirely different debate? Of course, but this is just an example. What we see is that people are like, we can't do that because of our religion. That's fine. You don't have to, but other people should have the choice to do so. And what we've seen in the past is that with previous Supreme Court decisions, it has been ruled that women and people who are able to bear children have a right to do so. Therefore, we should not see people attacking it and trying to ban it based off of their personal religion. You have a right to express yourself and a right to freedom. However, your religion should not be the law. Because if your religion is the law and it infringes on my rights, what am I supposed to do? Because I can't get rid of your religion, but I want to get your religion out of the law that is infringing me. Thank you.
All right, Republican answer?
So I agree that one's religion should not be enshrined into law. The First Amendment ensures that we do not establish a theocracy here in the United States, that one particular religion or sect of a religion dominates how our laws are created. It's important to understand why we are like this in the United States, because we came from, in England and in the United Kingdom today, they have the Church of England, which impose, and they have rules which say that the monarch of the United Kingdom cannot be a Catholic. It has to be Church of England, or else they lose certain titles and privileges. So in the United States, we embolden and we embrace the fact that there are people with other religions, and we welcome that. We welcome the fact that there are people from different religious aspects that see things differently. And when it comes to judges, The role of a judge, excuse me, in my view, is to interpret the law, not to impose their own personal will or personal beliefs into the law. I can feel one way about a certain thing based on my religion, but what the law says, that is what the law is, not how my personal beliefs affect that law. And so it is important for judges to abstain from putting in their own personal beliefs and look at the case, whether, if it's on the Supreme Court, look at the case with the facts that's presented and the law and what the laws say. What does the Constitution say? What are the laws that are on our books in the United States say? And so that's why I think it's important that we do not impose religious purity tests or religious tests on laws before they're passed. And that's why I don't think that judges or even politicians in general should not be using their religion to guide policy in this country. Thank you.
Democratic response.
Now, I'm a bit confused. That's probably just me because I can't hear that well, but you talked about like religion guiding policy, and I also think that's okay. But I think that there is still a fine line between you allowing your religion to guide you and how you want a policy to play out versus it being the entire law of the nation. For example, if there's someone who had a religion and they're like, we should re-enslave, insert group here. If they are on the Supreme Court and they are able to make that decision, of course I'd be worried because my rights are at stake. And so I think that this is a good analogy because if you've never had your rights at stake before, you don't know what it's like to be afraid that they are at stake. And so I think that what a lot of people are missing from this entire Supreme Court debate is that this isn't just a regular judge seat. This is the seat at the highest Supreme Court that once ruled that women are allowed to vote, which once ruled that I could be a free person and I did not have to pick cotton at a random plantation, that ruled that my granddad could vote. And so what I think that we're missing here is that this is not just a normal election. We're talking about someone who has known to be against Roe v. Wade, who has known to be anti a lot of democratic policies that a lot of Americans are in favor of, and who has religious views that could endanger my reproductive rights, going on to the highest court and being able to overturn that, and it may not even be based in constitutional law and authority. And so that's why we are concerned. And again, it is great that she has a religion. You don't have to have a religion, but the fact that she's so in-depth and so connected with her God, that's wonderful. However, her God should not be the one making the decision, and her God should not be enshrined into the law. And I think we've talked about this before, and we've seen this before with Americans who founded America coming over and being free from their own religious oppression. And so I think that we should take their lesson and not try to do the same thing again. Thank you.
Republican response.
So just like Judge Barrett, I am also Catholic. And I also, too, am concerned about judges using their religious beliefs to affect change in laws and policies. Now, I'm not saying I'm an expert, and I do not know Judge Barrett's positions on Roe versus Wade and how she would rule in the case. And I don't think anybody except Judge Barrett would know how she would rule unless a case was presented for her and she had the facts. So, and listening to the hearing that's been going on the past 2 days, and reading some things about Judge Barrett, it seems to me that Judge Barrett will interpret a case by the text of the law and by how it's presented before her. She's even said many times in these hearings, she might walk into a case or walk into a hearing before her, having read the briefs, having maybe an idea of how she might vote, but then when it comes time for deliberations, she's completely changed her position. And so I think that tells and shows that Judge Barrett is not going to impose her religious wills or her religious beliefs on policies or on decisions of the court. And I honestly don't think that, and I don't think we have seen the current justices on the Supreme Court do that as well. Thank you.
Okay, our time is drawing to a close, but we have time for closing remarks, final statements from each of our participants. Each debater will get 1 minute. The Democrats will start because the Republicans received the first question at the beginning of the debate.
This debate in this presidency, in this election, is not about Donald Trump, and it's not about Joe Biden either. It's about if you want to wake up to this America another day. It's about if you want to hear people cry over how divided America is. It's about if you want to see black people be still emotionally tired from seeing more black people die unjustly. It's about you seeing children in cages. It's about you seeing the America that you want to see. If this is not it, then you know who to vote for, you know who to choose, and if this is what you want, you also know who to choose. Now, is this a two-sided argument? Of course not. There are many nuances to how America is and why it is this way today. But however, currently, you have two options. And if you don't like the way that America is right now, and if you want to see a change, and if you want to see something different, then I encourage you to vote for Joe Biden in the election. Thank you.
I want to encourage all Americans, especially those living on campus and those in the state of Missouri, to vote. This is your greatest freedom as an American. Many people around the world live under regimes that kill LGBTQ people, that punish women for being women, that treat people like they're scum. I promise you, your vote matters. You will not regret your vote. Thank you.
So this election has been called, the most important election in our lifetime. I guess when you're 20 or 21 in my case, I don't even know how old I am, then that may seem like, oh yeah, I guess so. But I do think it's very important. There's a lot of pivotal issues that we even get to talk about: immigration, trade, healthcare, a lot of things that President Trump has made strides on. We didn't get to touch on here. He has done things like, did anybody remember ISIS? They were defeated under President Trump's administration. And we haven't really had a major Islamic terrorist attack since late 2017. It's kind of something we don't really remember. President Trump doesn't really get a lot of credit for things he's done. And I hear kind of anecdotes and kind of lies about him, but he is somebody who's presided over, pre-COVID, of course, this shocked the world, this shocked the U.S., a great economy that uplifted everybody, all Americans. It was booming, it was roaring. People were starting to have kids again, start families, buy bigger houses, get newer cars, and just a greater America. And I hope that Donald Trump can get reelected and we get right back to that. Thank you.
Well, firstly, I wanted to say thank you to everybody on the stage, and thank you to the Arrow for putting on this event. It is crucially important that we have this kind of civil discourse in our country, so that way we the people understand the policies of each party. And no matter where your policy positions are, whether you agree with my friends on the Democrat side or us here on the Republican side, it is vitally important that you vote. It's the most important way that you can actually affect change in our government and in our society. So please, I just ask you, whether you vote for the Democrats, the Republicans, Libertarians, Greens, whoever you decide to vote for, just please vote. That's the most important thing that I think we can portray from this debate tonight, is that everybody should go out and vote. So just please, go vote. Thank you.
I want to thank you all for joining us tonight, and thank you to our debaters and our moderators for such an informative evening. Be sure to follow the Arrow for all of your 2020 election coverage. I'm Ashlyn Wyman. Thanks again and good night.